I made $20 million by the time I was in my early 30s. Here's my story. So I was born in Lahore, Pakistan, and when I was about 5 years old, my parents decided to move out of Pakistan because there was so much corruption and limited opportunities, and they wanted to move to England because I had an uncle already living there. We moved to Luton, England, which surprisingly is the same city Andrew Tate grew up in. Lived there a couple of years. After that, we found out we had an uncle living in Ohio, and he offered to help us move to Ohio because it's land of opportunity, it's America, you can accomplish anything there. So I ended up moving to Ohio after a couple of years after living in England. And my dad had an engineering degree from Pakistan, but the problem was the engineering degree in the USA was completely worthless. He had to go back to school and relearn everything to get a job in that field. And he didn't have time for that because now he has a wife and 2 kids to support, myself and my sister. He found some work at a convenience store through my uncle who was already living there. My dad ended up working at the convenience store 13, 14, 15 hours a day. My mom joined him eventually, and they were basically running this convenience store for this other guy. And I remember at one point, the convenience store was in a really bad area of Cleveland, Ohio. A guy came in and basically robbed them at gunpoint, took all the cash out. And it was a pretty traumatic experience. And when I heard that happen, I just knew I had to do something with my life so my parents would never have to be in a position where something like this would ever happen again. Because the area we lived in was a pretty low income neighborhood. The middle school and elementary school I went to was pretty low income as well too. At the time, we were trying to figure things out. English was pretty bad. I had horrible social skills because I was a kid and trying to get used to how this stuff works in the USA. I just get bullied a lot, picked on a lot. When I was growing up, I was fat, chubby, out of shape, couldn't really fit in, had a lot of social anxiety because I come from a Muslim background. Parents were very conservative in terms of religion. They're worried about I would go out and drink and do drugs and hang around wrong kids, get into gang violence or something crazy. So they kept us in the house, got a little suppressed, but it caused a lot of issues with my self-esteem because I didn't know how to socialize properly. So after living in Cleveland, Ohio, my parents moved out to a bunch of different areas. They lived in Toronto, Canada, moved to Chicago, back to Ohio, back to Chicago again. So during that period, I went to multiple middle schools, multiple high schools, and finally I got to a point where I went to college. I ended up majoring in computer science initially. I did coding for a year, ended up hating it, and then I switched to business and I double majored in accounting and finance. I just was very intrigued about numbers and finances and money and investments and starting businesses. So I ended up graduating from the Ohio State University, had almost like a perfect GPA. Every one of my classes I overperformed. I was very studious, but the one thing I lacked was having good social skills. I was so good at my academics, and social skills were what really, I think, separates a lot of people who are successful versus not successful, because people who are very social and they're really good at networking, they're able to create opportunities for themselves. Because I saw people half the grades I did in college getting better positions than me. I'm like, what's going on? What is this person doing different than me when they have half the grades I do? When you're able to connect with human beings on a different level, like they don't care about your grades. At the end of the day, it's all politics. Is this person somebody I can connect with outside of work? Is this person I can assimilate with and connect with and have good ideas or good conversations with? Take this person out to clients and this person be able to jive with them. There was a lot of interesting things growing up, like I didn't really learn, but my parents taught me how to be a good person and also how to be a good Muslim. Besides those 2 things, I didn't really learn a lot from my parents, unfortunately. I didn't have any entrepreneurs in my family. I didn't really have mentors growing up per se. Fast forward, graduating from the State University, accounting finance degree, I got a job in consulting. I had to travel 30, 35 weeks a year. And I remember within 30 days of working at this firm out of school, I got depressed. I went to the office and I just saw these people, this little cubicle just sitting there like little hamsters in a wheel, just running, working these crazy hours. And then the boss would give them a paycheck, a piece of cheese after 2 weeks of hard work. And they would come back, jump on a hamster wheel again, get a piece of cheese. Because you work and trying to climb this slow growth corporate ladder and a 5 to 10% raise per year after taxes, complete trash. Within 30, 60 days of working at this firm, my first job out of school, the whole depression hit me. And I went home back to my apartment in Dayton, Ohio, and I started researching like self-help stuff, just money making things like that. And I came across this book called Think and Grow Rich. And I read it probably 7 times in my life already. So when I first initially read that book, when I graduated college, it just had a lot of really abstract topics in there. Napoleon Hill, he went and he interviewed 200 of the world's most successful people over a number of years, and he asked them about their thought processes, their lifestyles, what they did on a daily basis, their mindset and their habits. And what he found was every one of these human beings had something very, very common with each other. And he took those habits, the thought processes, and he put it in this book. So when I read that book, it completely rewired my brain. And I was was never the same again. And after that, within the next probably 60, 90 days, I went on Amazon. I bought 30, 40 more books, Zig Ziglar stuff, Tony Robbins stuff, the 4-Hour Work Week, the biography of Steve Jobs and Arnold Schwarzenegger, just like how these multimillionaires and billionaires think. It was just really intriguing to me. So the more I consumed this information and the more I went to my job, I just got really miserable and even more depressed, because what happened was my mind is up here. Like my thought processes were up here. I should be like a multimillionaire, a billionaire, but my financial situation was like right here. So like I wasn't moving up, and I was trying to close that gap. I should be up here, but my financial situation is out here. I'm making this crappy salary, working these crazy hours, but my mindset's up here. So I had to figure out ways to close this gap. At that time, online marketing wasn't big, not as big as it is now. Like now you got these crazy YouTube videos and Shopify and Amazon and crypto. There was like not much crypto back then. It wasn't even a thing. Right now, it's so easy to create online businesses compared to like back then. So I didn't have mentorship. My parents were not mentors. I didn't have friends and family that were entrepreneurs. And so I had to figure things out. What can I do to close this gap? But when I went through this whole struggle, I would have a job for 4 to 6 months. And because of my frustration, I would get too ambitious, and they would notice that every position I've ever had in my life, a job position, I've overperformed everybody else. Hands down. I was the top 3 performer in every position I've ever had. But the issue was I just hated management. I hated authority. I hated people with what to do. It irritated and frustrated the heck out of me. So I needed to do something about that. So what happened was I would overperform really well, but then when it came to management, they wouldn't like my tone about something. I would question authority and question processes. These people, obviously, you plug inside the matrix and they want you to do A, B, and C and shut your mouth and do your job and stick to a requirement, and you get a picture every 2 weeks. That's the whole structure of a corporate environment. You just put inside a box and you're told what to do. You have these certain duties you're supposed to accomplish, and then once you do the duties, they give you a paycheck. If you question certain things, they don't like that in a lot of corporate structures. So I would basically get fired, then I would go on unemployment, and then I look for another job, and then that will last for another like 4 to 6 months, and I would get fired again. And this whole period, I had multiple jobs working for a bunch of firms. The work in itself, the consulting work I did was a pretty good experience. I consulted with over 500 private public companies, traveling 30, 35 weeks a year. I did a lot of due diligence for private equity firms and venture capital. I got to go inside these huge companies that are doing revenue anywhere from 5-10 million up to $1 billion plus a year. And all my clients were banks and private equity firms. So manufacturing companies, tech companies, e-commerce companies, pharmaceutical companies, healthcare companies. Spent time at the headquarters. Like I said, I overperformed in every position, but when it came to authority, I would get fired. Every time I would get fired, I would collect unemployment and make 30-40% of the previous income I was making before. And it was frustrating. So I was broke. So what I should do in these periods of times, there's months of gaps where I had no job, I would go to Barnes and Nobles and I would sit there. I would just pick out books on marketing, financial instruments, private equity, venture capital, social science, social intelligence, how to read people's body language, different types of books that I knew just were very interesting to me that as a school system would never teach. So I'd pick up these books and I would read multiple chapters of these books and I would bookmark them. And since I'm a tall guy, I'm 6'5", I'll put them on the top shelf and nobody can see it. And I would come back the next day, pick it up from the top shelf and then continue reading the book. So I read like probably dozens and dozens of books this method because I was broke. I didn't want to buy the books and I would just sit in Barnes and Nobles for hours a day, every day, just reading through these books. So that gave me a lot of interesting eyesight. I love the whole personal development. This knowledge I'm consuming right now, I know it would come handy at some point and I just don't know when it's gonna come handy, but I wanted to keep myself sharp because your brain is the most powerful instrument that you have. Your CPU, you have your phone, and people are so quick to upgrade their phone. The next iPhone 15, 16, and 17 comes out and it's extra 5-10 megapixels. People go out and buy it, but they fail to upgrade their CPU. A lot of people, their brains is like a iPhone 16 with an iPhone 1 processor. If you stop growing, if you stop reading, if you stop consuming information and using it, it's completely no use for you to have this. This is the most powerful thing you're ever gonna have. So you have to be constantly upgrading, constantly feeding information, and constantly trying and testing things out. I was a big proponent of reading books. I couldn't get access to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett. What's the next best thing? Is read their biographies, read their books, read their thought processes. How do they think? So once you see that you can take information and mimic and take their thought processes and the habits and you internalize it yourself, then it's much easier for you to project it out into the world versus just trying to think like a 8-to-5 Ouija person who wants to just run on a hamster wheel and collect cheese and make money. Upgrading your CPU and feeding yourself information, reading books and podcasts, personal development is so important. And that's one of the main things that's helping make millions and millions of dollars is the information I consume and the people I surround myself with. So anyways, after being fired from multiple jobs, I remember I was living in Chicago at the time, but working for a firm. And this was the last job I ever had. My mom and dad were living in Ohio and my dad got diagnosed with ALS disease. And if you don't know what ALS disease is, it's a pretty horrible disease. It's a muscle and nervous system degenerative disease. And it completely deteriorates your muscles and nerves over a period of time. time. A lot of cases is worse than cancer because cancer, at least you can diagnose it and you can actually go through chemotherapy and possibly cure it if caught early enough. ALS, there's no cause for it and there's no cure for it either. But it's a very progressive disease, very horrible to watch. And I saw my dad go through this disease. Over a period of 3 years, my mom and dad moved from Cleveland, Ohio to Chicago into my place. And I saw my dad's health completely just deteriorate and plummet. It's a pretty horrible experience to see that. And I remember one day I was at a client and I got a call from my mom that my dad's being rushed to the hospital. He can't breathe. I knew back in my head that this wasn't going to end good. And this was essentially the last part of the disease, because the last part of the disease is you can't breathe on your own. It's a muscle degenerative disease. And my dad got rushed to the hospital in Chicago, and the doctor gave us two choices. Number one is we're going to put a respirator and a trach in his neck so he can properly breathe, but that's a temporary solution. And number two is we just take it off and let him pass. And just hearing that, it was just like so traumatic. I just missed my dad in front of me and my mom's there crying. And the doctor said that we can put a respirator and trach in his neck and I'll give him another maybe 6 to 9 months extra to live. But the problem is, if you do that, the disease is still going to progress and it's going to get worse for him and also for us, watching him seeing go through that as well too. My mom couldn't let him go. That's her husband. This is my dad. She couldn't let him go. So she kept him on a respirator for about 6 to 9 months and the disease got worse. At that same time, when I got admitted to the hospital, I was working for a firm and they wanted me to travel because I was a consultant and I couldn't travel. So I got on a call with the partner and the manager of the firm, had a conversation. I told them I couldn't travel. I cannot name the firm for legal reasons, but they were not understanding enough. And I got to argument with them. They didn't like my tone. They fired me in the worst possible time. I lost my job, no income coming in, and my dad's lying at the hospital. It was very, very stressful and one of the toughest years of my life. And from that day, I vowed to never ever work for anybody again. And this was 9 plus years ago. I was going through a lot. I started my own consulting company. I started cold emailing and cold calling on different clients and different banks. And I got a couple of banking clients, some contracts. I was able to get some consulting work. But at the same time, I was getting burnt out from looking at numbers all the time and traveling. So I wanted to try this online thing. I was following it a little bit over the number of years. I just didn't know where to start. I need to be making money online with a laptop and internet connection anywhere in the world. I just don't know how to start. And I need to be detached from going to an office and traveling. How do I start? So what I should do was drop my mom at the hospital. My mom is a typical Middle Eastern woman who got married off very young and she relied on her husband for everything. She had very limited skills. She didn't know how to drive. I was responsible for doing anything. And I used to drop off at the hospital and go to a nearby Starbucks, the hospital, and spend 12, 13, 14 hours a day at the Starbucks almost every day, just consuming videos and courses and learning about e-commerce and digital marketing and trying to internalize Facebook ads and Shopify and Amazon and online affiliate marketing, trying to consume and absorb as much as I could until like my eyes would tire out. Sit there and watch videos, consume, take notes and how stuff worked. I had hundreds and hundreds of pages of notes and things I took. And it was a very tough time. My dad died at the hospital. I'm learning about e-commerce. So unfortunately, at the end of that year, my dad ended up passing away because the disease, there was no cure. It was just very tough seeing him pass away. And I knew that I couldn't ever have a job again because I knew as things progressed, I'd take care of my mom. I eventually need to get married and have kids. So I needed some way to escape this matrix, this rat race. I didn't want to be a hamster on the wheel. So I accumulated a lot of debt because I was investing in courses and coaching and learning about things online. So that first year was building the foundation of online marketing. And I lost a bunch of money that first year. The following year, I basically did over $130,000 on Shopify dropshipping from China. And then the following year after that, I hit 6 figures in 1 month dropshipping again. And then the following year after that, I hit over $1 million in 1 month dropshipping from China. I had a team of over 40 people, product research, we had a product manager, fulfillment team, we had a media buying team, all these different pieces together, customer service team. We were able to build a big team. I spent time in China as well too. And I had this whole system and we were making millions of dollars per year. I took a bunch of that money, I put it into crypto, some stocks and a couple of mutual funds and hedge funds, invested in a couple of companies as well too. And I was able to, by the time I was in my 30s, accumulate over $20 million through these various methods, from e-com to investing into crypto and a couple other methods. What I'm trying to say, give you guys this backstory is because I came from nothing. I grew up poor and my mom and dad were living paycheck to paycheck, barely making ends meet. Us going out Friday night to a restaurant was like Taco Bell and we got excited over Taco Bell and Pizza Hut or McDonald's. That was exciting for us. That's how I grew up. When you're pushed against the wall and when you have no choice but to perform, all these people people are around you, they're unhappy with their lives, or they're going to a job they hate and they're experiencing some type of tragedy. And those things will happen to us no matter what. So I've just learned to use personal development and practice stoicism and be close to God. I've learned to detach myself from outcomes, because job losses, death, tragedies, car accidents, taxes are gonna happen no matter what, whether you want them to happen or not. So you can't control these things, but you control is yourself and your mindset. If something happens to you, it's how you respond to that thing that's happening. It's so vital. When you start detaching yourself from outcomes, this is happening, but it's outside your control, and you don't let these negative things affect you, then life becomes a whole lot easier. So I just developed such extreme mental fortitude where life throws everything at me and I'm able to handle it. People will get pissed off because somebody cut them off on a highway, or they were driving something, or they hit a pothole or they got a ticket, or small minuscule things in your life people get really frustrated and annoyed about. And how are we going to excel in the game of life if you let every little thing control your emotions? If I was able to go from broke to being nobody, having no mentors, and teaching myself through personal development and finding mentorships in the books I read and self-teaching myself, you guys can too. One of you watching this video, you guys can really, if you want something, you can have it. If you set good goals and you work hard and you dedicate yourself, if you consume information, you also need to execute on it too. So consuming plus executing on it too. If it doesn't work, you pivot and try again. There's a story of bamboo trees. If you look at a bamboo tree, the seed of a bamboo tree is planted in the soil, and what it does is the next 2-3 years, it roots underneath the soil. Really strong foundation. It takes a lot of time. You don't see anything above the surface, right? Like almost zero growth. Unless you live maybe a couple inches or something, very little bit. Below the surface, it's built such a strong foundation that if you are patient enough, after 3 to 5 years, the bamboo tree shoots up out of the soil 50 to 100, 150 feet. But people are so afraid to go through that foundational phase that working in private. So if you put those hours in privately and then you go out and you perform in public, it's just hours you are accumulating. You become so good at it in public. This is how Michael Jordan became one of the best basketball players, and Kobe Bryant as well too, because they spent so much time privately performing, shooting jump shots, doing things, grinding. Nobody was watching them. There was no camera. So like when they were able to perform on court, they executed it so flawlessly. And it takes time. Overnight success is no such thing. Overnight success takes years and years. And I didn't become overnight success overnight. It's called winning a lottery. A lottery is complete BS. I became an overnight success over a period of time. And you guys can too if you put in the hard work, the grit. And I hope this video was really able to motivate you, that you guys can accomplish anything that you want and you put your mind to. I have tons more videos coming out. Hit the subscribe button, and I look forward to you guys on the next video.